Okay, now I'm at the Auckland airport and I'm right now filming using the DJI Osmo 360. So we are going to Australia, Melbourne for a bit over a week for a family holiday over there. And after that, back to New Zealand, and then I'll be off to Japan again for another 10 or 11 days or so, going there to shoot some content. So I'm bringing this DJI Osmo 360 with me and also the Insta360 X5 because I want to shoot with these two cameras together to find out if someone wants to use a camera as a travel camera, which one is the better choice. Okay, now a few quick notes before we dive in. In this video, I'll be covering quite a lot and sharing the results from many different tests, but this isn't meant to be a fully comprehensive review. My focus is on using these cameras as travel cameras. That's where I think 360 cameras really shine and how I personally use them most of the time. I don't ride motorbikes, do any extreme sports or go diving in the sea, so you won't see any tests like that in this review. Like my other camera reviews, most of the tests here were done using the default settings. That's partially because if I start changing settings, matching settings across two cameras can be tricky, and if I do it wrong, it will be even worse. But it's also because I believe most users would just use the camera with default settings anyway. Whenever I use non-default settings, I'll make that clear. Both the DJI Osmo 360 and the Insta360 X5 were sent to me for review by DJI and Insta360. I were not paid by either company. I've marked this video as sponsored only because the camera themselves were provided. Some of the accessories I used in this review I bought them myself, and all the trips I mentioned were not sponsored by either brand. Okay, let's start with a quick overview of the DJI Osmo 360 and some of the key things I noticed while using it. I already have a full review of the Insta360 X5. I'll leave a link below if you want to know more about the X5. The Osmo 360 has a compact square-shaped body. I expect it to be small, but I was still surprised by how light it feels. At just 183 grams, it's a bit lighter than the Insta360 X5, which comes in at 200 grams. That's only about a 10% difference on paper. You won't feel the difference when the camera is in your camera bag, but you will notice it when the camera is mounted on a long selfie stick. Design-wise, the Osmo's square body contrasts with the X5's taller rectangle. Both use a touch screen plus a few buttons, but the different body shape affect how you handle them. The X5's longer body is easier to hold without accidentally blocking the lens. Personally though, I almost always use a selfie stick when shooting with 360 cameras, so it's not really an issue for me. The screens are also different. The Osmo has a 2-inch horizontal display, while the X5 has a 2.5-inch vertical screen. In terms of quality of the screen, I don't find much difference between the two. However, the X5 screen is definitely bigger. And because of that, the user interface can display text and icon at the same time, while the Osmo only displays icon, so new users need to spend a bit of time to figure out and remember what each icon means when they are using the Osmo. But I actually prefer horizontal screens on 360 cameras for preview. I care more about seeing left and right rather than top and bottom when shooting. On both cameras, the battery and the micro SD card share the same compartment, but there's a key difference. With the Osmo, you can swap the micro SD card without removing the battery. On the X5, the battery always has to come out first, which can get annoying if you change cards often when traveling. The Osmo also includes 105GB of built-in memory. I do wish it was larger. For some users, 100GB may not last a full day of shooting, but it's still a really useful feature and a great backup if you forgot to bring a card, especially when traveling. By the way, DJI suggests me to only use the card listed in their compatibility list, so I bought a Kingston card to use with the Osmo 360 and I didn't have any problem at all. I used a SanDisk micro SD card with the X5 and also didn't have any problem. Another detail I noticed is the Osmo's door design. DJI uses perpendicular locks, which at first felt awkward and slower to open. But I've come to appreciate them. Comparing with camera that has no door lock or the lock can be easily unlocked, the Osmo's door lock design prevents the doors from accidentally opening when you pull the camera out of your camera bag. There were a few times when I got home and found the X5 door had already popped open slightly, as the X5 doesn't have any lock at all. That doesn't really bother me because I rarely use 360 cameras near water, but for some people it could be a bigger concern. Another thoughtful touch, even the standard Osmo 360 kit includes a lens cover and it is semi-transparent. It sounds minor, but being able to see the screen preview through the semi-transparent cover feels a lot nicer than a fully blackout lens cap. Now, the elephant in the room. The Osmo 360 doesn't have user-replaceable lenses. This is probably its biggest weakness compared to the X5. The protruding lenses on 360 camera are more vulnerable to damage. I have damaged lenses on my other 360 camera before, so being able to replace them in the field is a big deal. To be fair, DJI's repair service is reasonably priced. Here in Australia and New Zealand, replacing a single lens costs about 46 Australian dollars or 66 for both, and that includes the return shipping. The downside is you have to send the camera to the DJI's Australia office and wait for it to come back. For travel, being able to replace the lens yourself is definitely more convenient. That said, I didn't actually bring my X5 lens replacement kit with me to my last two trips because I want to pack light, which means I also wouldn't have been able to fix it immediately if something happened during my last two trips. Luckily, nothing bad happened to either of the camera during the last two trips. A workaround for the Osmo is to use the optional lens protector. DJI hasn't sent me the one for the Osmo 360, so I cannot tell you how good they are. But my previous experience with other 360 cameras lens protector is that there would be a little bit of image quality compromises. So as I said, it's a workaround, not an actual solution. Now let's have a look at the video image quality. This is one area the 360 camera is still improving dramatically every generation. I brought the Insta360 X5 to Japan a few years ago to attend the Panasonic Lumix S5 launch event there, and I used the camera to capture some video. The daytime footage was great, but I end up pretty much didn't use any of the nighttime footage because the low light image quality was just terrible. So when you are traveling, low light performance is very important because you will be traveling day and night, and even during the day, quite often you may go to indoor venues that are quite dark. One of the Osmo's biggest selling point is the 1-inch equivalent square sensor. Now, just to be clear, the sensor is actually 1/1.1 inch, but because it is a square-shaped sensor, and 360 cameras only use the center square part of the sensor, so the actual sensor area used for recording is the same as what you get from a rectangular 1-inch sensor. The square sensor design also has another advantage. It is more efficient. A traditional rectangular sensor wastes a lot of unused area when capturing a circular fisheye image. But with the Osmo's square sensor, it avoids that and doesn't waste processing power or energy on pixels that are not used. At least that's in theory. We'll look at the battery life performance a little bit later. So I have shot a lot of side-by-side comparison videos. Let's have a look at some of the results. The first test was at the Auckland airport. shooting in 8K 30 with all settings at default with both the Osmo and the X5. It was indoors but fairly bright. Look at the footage. Apart from a slight difference in white balance, the two videos look very similar. Any difference is so small that shouldn't really matter when shooting in real life. Okay, now let's look at another daytime comparison videos. This one I shot it when I was in Tokyo. It was one of the only 2 days that I saw sun and blue sky, so I took the camera out to shoot some more comparison videos. As expected, the quality from both cameras are great. Both captured nice and clean videos with nice colors. I actually prefer the slightly lower contrast look from the X5. It looks a little bit more natural to me. However, if you look at the sky, the X5 has a lot more blown out area, while the Osmo managed to minimize the blown out area around the sun. And during the trip, I also went to Kyoto and they have the brand new Team Lab Biovortex Kyoto. It was opened just a few days before I arrived. If you've been to any Team Lab, you will know a large part of the Team Lab is usually very dark inside with illuminated artworks. A lot of things are moving and you'll be walking around as well. So that would be a great place to test these 360 cameras to their limits. So the first test I did, I record in normal 8K 30 mode. Considering how dark the venue is, I would say both cameras did a really good job and way better than what the other 360 cameras could do from just 2 or 3 years ago. However, there is some noticeable difference between these two cameras. Just like the other comparison videos, I shot in fully automatic mode. It seems the X5 choose a slower shutter speed. As you can see, there are more motion blur than the Osmo. I think Insta360 did that probably so that the X5 can shoot at a lower ISO to get better image quality. Of course, the trade-off is there will be more motion blur if the camera moves. However, I would say despite the Osmo seems to be shooting at a higher shutter speed and therefore probably higher ISO as well, Osmo's image quality is actually better. It's cleaner, brighter, and also has better colors. At some part of the video, the difference is very noticeable. I think this low light video from the DJI Osmo 360 is really good for a 360 camera. Next, I enable the Super Night mode on the Osmo and Pure Video mode on the X5 to improve both cameras' low light image quality. Look at the video, I think you can notice the X5 has some significant boost in terms of image quality. The image quality gets really close to Osmo now. But the Osmo is still better. It has a bit more shadow details. The colors are more accurate. And if you look at it a bit closer, you will notice that the X5 has more image artifact because of the more aggressive processing. Having said that, I think casual users may not really notice this difference. And if you look at this example, when I enter an area that is really dark, then you can see the X5, even with the Pure Video mode, cannot recover any details on my face and my shirt, while the Osmo still managed to capture a bit of shadow details from that very dark area. So overall, I would say Insta360 X5's AI processing is indeed very impressive, but it still can't completely compensate the difference in sensor size when you push the camera to the limits. If you're like me and enjoy editing the video to get the best results, maximizing dynamic range and fine-tuning colors, the Osmo 360 has a big advantage. It records in 10-bit color depth and it supports D-Log-M flat picture profile. DJI claims up to 13.5 stops of dynamic range. In practice, it is very impressive for a camera in this class. You can recover quite a bit of highlights, shadows hold more details, the colors are not oversaturated at all, so overall you just have a lot more flexibility compared to X5's 8-bit footage. It's also a lot easier to mix the Osmo's D-Log footage with other DJI cameras or even their drones that uses the same D-Log profile. And if you are carrying cameras from other brands, the flexible 10-bit log files make color matching much simpler. so your Osmo 360 video clips won't stick out awkwardly. Oh yes, the Osmo 360 can record 8K up to 50 frames per second, but not 60 frames per second. The X5 can only goes up to 8K 30. I'm still not sure why Insta360 hasn't added 10-bit support. Maybe they are saving it for a Pro model, or perhaps it could come in a future firmware update. I actually asked Insta360 about this, but I never got a clear answer. But anyway, right now, the Osmo is the better choice if you want to spend time to maximize the video quality. And just to clarify, the X5 does have an active HDR mode when shooting at 5.7K, which also allows you to shoot in iLog. But this is a 8-bit output and is also not true HDR 10-bit video. Turning on these features would extend the visible dynamic range, but it still has all the limitations of 8-bit video files. For photos, the Osmo 360 can capture up to 120 megapixel, while the X5 tops out at 72 megapixel. On paper, the Osmo has the resolution advantage, but the specs don't always tell the full story. And there's also an important difference. The Osmo only shoots JPEG, at least with the firmware I'm testing right now, while the X5 supports RAW photo output. So this time is kind of opposite of the video mode. The X5's RAW output gives photographers more flexibility in editing. I've asked DJI about RAW support on the Osmo, and their reply was they consider if enough users request it. So if that's something you want, let me know in the comments and I will pass the feedback on. Now let's look at some test photos. First, a daytime test inside a shopping center with a glass roof in Melbourne. If you have been to Melbourne before, you will know where it is. It is a very high contrast scene with bright highlights and deep shadows. Both cameras were set to auto exposure and auto white balance. The Osmo photo came out slightly warmer, which looked a little bit more pleasing to my eye. Exposure was also a touch brighter, bringing out more shadow details, though it did clip the highlights on a wall banner a bit more than the X5. The glass roof was completely blown out on both cameras. At first glance, the X5 photo looked sharper and more detailed. That's a bit of surprise considering the Osmo has higher resolution. But zooming in, the X5 photo revealed a few issues. Text like "trade different" and the white writing on the black floor had halos, a classic sign of over-sharpening. The Momo logo showed incorrect letters, suggesting some kind of AI upscaling that introduced artifacts. The Osmo doesn't have any of these issues. At the very top, there is a green panel with vertical lines. These lines are completely lost in the X5 image, while the Osmo still managed to preserve them. So while the Osmo photo looks like it captured less details initially, it actually kept more fine details and looked more natural. The X5's more aggressive processing made images appear sharper, but at the cost of artifacts and accuracy. Both cameras also have HDR photo mode that improves dynamic range. With HDR enabled, I could finally see blue sky through the glass roof instead of a blown out white patch. Here, the X5 has the edge, because it can capture HDR at the full 72 megapixel resolution, while the Osmo drops down to 30 megapixel in HDR mode. The reduction in resolution is noticeable if you zoom in. Okay, now let's have a look at the night photos. The differences were even clearer. The X5 used stronger noise reduction, producing a cleaner image with less visible noise. But it also erased a lot of texture. For example, the brick wall next to the blue car was almost completely smoothed over. The Osmo photo, while noisier, preserved the brick wall pattern and more fine details overall. So overall, the Osmo does capture more detail than the X5. What I do like though is DJI's more natural approach to image processing. It feels less aggressive and keeps the photo looking cleaner. On the flip side, the X5's ability to shoot raw photo is something many Osmo users would definitely wish they had. One last note, both cameras need a short pause after capturing a photo. On the Osmo at 120 megapixel, the wait is about 5 seconds. On the X5 at 72 megapixel, shooting in pure shot format is roughly 8 seconds. Because Insta360 has been making 360 cameras for many years, they already have a huge range of accessories, and a lot of them are compatible with the X5. Even just the selfie sticks and grips, there are more than a dozen options. One I really like is their new foldable selfie stick for the X5. It's compact and super handy when traveling. I can fit the X5 with the selfie stick attached into my pocket easily. On the other hand, DJI also offers quite a few mounting accessories, including some unique ones. For example, the battery extension rod is basically a selfie stick with built-in battery that charges the camera without needing a cable because it uses the connector at the bottom of the camera. That is very convenient. Where DJI really stand out is cross compatibility with their other gear. The Osmo 360 uses the same quick release mount as the Osmo action cameras and the new Osmo Nano. So a lot of existing accessories designed for Osmo action cameras just work. For example, I use an existing DJI body harness with the Osmo 360 to shoot some first-person POV footage. I just need to add a quick release adapter. Now, to be fair, Insta360's dedicated harness for the X4 and X5 is definitely more secure, but DJI's system works across a wider range of their cameras. And since DJI has been using the same quick release mount for a while, there are already plenty of third-party options too. I actually picked up a small rig tiltable bracket that is a lot cheaper than DJI's own version. And I've been using it to shoot some vlogging style video in single lens mode. The Osmo 360 also supports Osmo audio, so it pairs seamlessly with DJI's latest wireless microphones. That's a big plus if you already own DJI's microphones, which I know is true for a lot of people. Battery compatibility is another advantage for DJI. The Osmo 360 uses the same battery as the Osmo Action 3, 4 and 5 Pro, so you can share batteries and chargers across cameras. In contrast, Insta360 has a habit of releasing a new battery design with almost every generation. I've complained about this before in my X5 review. Pretty much every time I upgrade my Insta360 camera, my old batteries, which are usually only about 1 year old, becomes useless. On top of that, the X5 uses a different quick release mount from Insta360's other cameras, and the only native wireless mic option is the Insta360 Mic Air. We'll talk about that more a little bit later when we do the audio test. So if you want the widest range of mounting accessories, Insta360 has the upper hand. But if you are planning to shoot with more than one type of camera, DJI's shared batteries, universal quick release mount, and the Osmo audio ecosystem make the Osmo 360 a more practical choice. Now let's talk about shooting modes. The Osmo 360 has the following 360 shooting modes: photo, video, super night, selfie mode, vortex, which is basically the same as Insta360's bullet time mode, and hyperlapse. Insta360 has been building out shooting features for years, so not a surprise they have more options. Apart from the standard photo and video modes that DJI has, it also offers a wider selection of modes like Insta-frame mode, road mode, and a few others. For me though, apart from Insta-frame, which I do find pretty useful, I rarely use all the other extra modes on the X5. But for some users, the extra mode offered by the X5 may be very useful. Since these are all just down to the firmware, it will be interesting to see if DJI will be adding more shooting mode to the Osmo 360 or not in the future. There are a few things I quite like about Osmo 360's single camera shooting mode. While there isn't any special shooting mode, you can shoot up to 120 frames per second in 4K resolution. And you can choose 4:3 or 16:9 output aspect ratios. My favorite feature is horizon steady. It keeps the horizon perfectly level even if you tilt the camera or spin it a full 360 degrees. Another thing I love is how fast you can switch between the front and rear lenses while recording. It's the quickest I've seen on any 360 camera. That makes the Osmo 360 really good for vlogging in single camera mode because you can flip seamlessly between filming yourself and what's in front of you without moving the camera. Okay, now let's do some audio tests. I'm recording right now using both the Osmo 360 and the Insta360 X5, and the audio that you're listening to is recorded using the built-in microphone of the Osmo 360. It is a bit windy right now, so you might be able to hear some wind noise captured by the built-in microphone. Both cameras I'm using default settings, including the audio settings. I'm recording in 8K 30, but otherwise everything is just using default setting. So now let me switch the audio to the Insta360 X5. So right now the audio you're listening to is recorded using the Insta360 X5's built-in microphone. What do you think about the audio that is captured by these two cameras? Which one do you think sound better? So next I'm going to switch to using the wireless microphone to record the audio. Okay, now I have connected wireless microphone to both the DJI Osmo 360 and the Insta360 X5. So the audio you're listening to right now is recorded using the Osmo 360 with the DJI Mic 3. So both of these cameras, they have the wireless microphone support, and both DJI and Insta360, they have their own wireless microphone that would work with this camera. With the DJI, there are multiple microphones that will support it. The one I'm using right now is the DJI Mic 3. And now let me switch to the Insta360 X5. So with the Insta360 X5, the microphone that supported would be the Mic Air. So this is what I have here right now. So both cameras, if you want to capture the best audio quality, you should be using the wireless microphone. And I also have the windshield installed onto the microphone, so you should not be able to hear any wind noise at all. So which microphone sounds better to you? Is it the DJI Mic 3 or is it the Insta360 Mic Air? To me, the Osmo 360's built-in microphone sounds a bit cleaner with less background noise. The X5 on the other hand does a better job handling wind noise, probably because of its new microphone design. So for windy outdoor places, I think the X5 is better. But for more quiet indoor places, the Osmo is better. And when you switch to wireless microphone, it gives you very noticeable improvement on both cameras. The Insta360 Mic Air is pretty solid. It captures my voice clearly with much less background noise. And for casual users, it's good enough. But the DJI Mic 3 is just on another level. It sounds more natural with fewer digital artifacts. I've heard some people mention their Osmo 360 has connection issue or audio drift when the camera was launched. I'm not sure if it's because DJI has already fixed these issues in firmware update, but I haven't experienced any of these issues myself. DJI also gives you a very nice bonus. You can connect two wireless microphones at the same time. That makes the Osmo 360 a much better choice if you are recording interviews or dialogue between two people. And because of the Osmo audio, I can share the same microphone across different DJI cameras really easily. When I was in Japan, I was shooting with the Osmo 360, the Osmo Nano, and even my Fujifilm X-M5, and the DJI Mic 3 works smoothly with all of them. By contrast, X5's wireless setup is more limited. It only supports one wireless microphone, and the Insta360 Mic Air doesn't even work with some of Insta360's own cameras like the Go 3S or with mirrorless cameras. There is a workaround that is using X5's USB-C port to connect to a system that has more than one microphone, but that's less straightforward. Interestingly, the Osmo 360 also supports USB-C audio input, even though DJI doesn't really advertise it. But if you try to plug in a USB receiver to the Osmo 360's USB port, you may find it's quite difficult because of the orientation of the USB port. But it seems like if you open the door for the USB port to a certain angle, then you can remove that door quite easily. But please do it very carefully so you don't damage anything. So overall, if you plan to use wireless microphones, the Osmo 360 is definitely the more flexible choice. One thing that makes 360 cameras unique is that editing software is just as important as the hardware. Most of the time, you need to process and reframe your 360 footage into a flat video or photo before you can actually use it. So in a way, the software matters just as much, if not more, than the camera itself. Insta360 has really set the standard here. Their desktop and mobile apps are super polished and packed with features. Other brands like Candle make great 360 camera hardware, but their software still feels a step behind. So I was really curious, could DJI match Insta360 on the software side? After a few weeks of using it, I'd say DJI has done a solid job, especially for their first attempt. I spent most of my time with DJI Studio on Mac, but I also tried DJI Mimo app on my iPhone, and both feel smooth, stable, and so far I haven't even had a single crash. The workflow is pretty similar to Insta360, but one key difference is that DJI Studio forces you to create a project and drop video clips into a timeline before you can edit or export. Personally, I find that a bit slower since I usually do multi-clip edits in other video editing software anyway. But that might just be me. In terms of performance, DJI Studio feels very responsive, but Insta360 Studio is still faster at rendering, at least with default settings. Of course, rendering speed really depends on things like stitching options or noise reduction and other export settings, so results may vary. Feature-wise, DJI covers the basics and even include AI tracking, which works really well, but there are still gaps. For example, you cannot add motion blur when speeding up footage for a hyperlapse. I'm sure DJI will keep improving, but right now, Insta360 still has advantage. The big question is whether DJI can catch up quickly, or if Insta360 will keep pushing ahead and stay on top. Battery life is another really important factor for a travel camera. When you're out exploring, you want to shoot as much as possible without constantly worrying about swapping batteries or carrying a whole stack of batteries and have to recharge them every night. Both cameras support USB-C fast charging. On paper, the Insta360 X5 has the advantage with a 2400 mAh battery compared to the Osmo 360's 1950 mAh battery. That's almost 25% bigger. So you'd expect X5 will have noticeably better runtime. But as I always say, specs don't tell the whole story. From my last 2 trips each day, shooting around 30 video clips, a dozen or so photos, and the occasional time-lapse, I never had to swap batteries on either camera during the day. To be fair, most of the video clips I shot were pretty short, around a minute or less. So if you are planning to record longer continuous videos, you would definitely want to have at least one spare battery. I also tested the Osmo 360 on a photo walk when I was in Melbourne, shooting in single lens mode 4K 30 boost mode continuously. When I got back to my apartment after 90 minutes, the battery was still at 58%. That really impressed me. For a more controlled test, I record 8K 30 360 video in my studio with both cameras running side by side. The X5 lasted 94 minutes before shutting down. The Osmo 360, despite having a smaller battery, managed 96.5 minutes, so it's slightly longer than the X5. Not really a huge difference, but I was surprised the Osmo actually lasts longer. One thing to note, the Osmo 360 had the always-on display enabled by default during the entire battery test, while the Insta360's display switched off automatically quite quickly. So if I had turned Osmo's always-on display off, it likely would have lasted even longer. Now both cameras have some kind of long battery life mode that if you enable will increase the battery life. But there will be some kind of trade-off. For example, with the Osmo 360, if you enable the endurance mode, it would disable the noise reduction, so there will be some impact to the low light image quality. Neither camera overheated in my test, but it was done indoor at around 18 degrees Celsius, so not exactly hot conditions. Using a thermal camera, I noticed the X5 was running a little bit warmer. By the end of the test, the X5 battery was about 54 degrees Celsius, while the Osmo was around 47 degrees Celsius, so roughly 7 degrees cooler. I also didn't have any overheating issue when I used these cameras in the much warmer Japan, when the temperature was mid to high 20 degrees Celsius during the day. A few more important things before we wrap up. Both the Osmo 360 and the X5 require activation through the apps before you can use the camera. DJI is slightly better here since it lets you use the camera up to 5 times before activation. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this requirement, but ever since Apple introduced it with the iPhone, more and more companies have followed this practice. But the main takeaway is, if you are buying either of these cameras for a trip, maybe even picking up at the airport for duty-free, make sure you activate it while you still have internet access. It's also a good idea to download the DJI Mimo or Insta360 app ahead of time, just so you don't end up with a camera you can't use. You might have also heard about reports of fogging with the Osmo 360. In my experience, I haven't seen this issue with my Osmo 360. I've used it in cold Melbourne, hot Japan, and here in New Zealand, including some long continuous recording. I even dipped the Osmo 360 underwater to see if it would cause problems, and I haven't noticed any condensation so far. I did check with DJI about this, and they gave me a pretty detailed explanation. The short version is, because the body is sealed, a big temperature difference between the inside and outside can cause condensation. Opening the battery door to reduce heat buildup and promoting air circulation would help, but of course the camera is not waterproof when the door is opened. Also, avoid sudden temperature changes like putting the camera straight into cold water. But as I said, in my own testing so far, I haven't had any fogging issues. If I do notice any fogging issue in the future, I'll report back in the comment section below. Lastly, I haven't really talked about stitching or image stabilization in this review. That's simply because both cameras handle them really well. At this point, most modern 360 cameras do a great job with these features, so there really isn't much to add. So, which one is the better travel camera? After using both on my last 2 trips, I'd say it's really hard to pick a clear winner. You really can't go wrong with either. Compared to 360 cameras from just a few years ago, both of these cameras are massive upgrades. But each one has its own strength. For the Insta360 X5, there are 2 big advantages. First is the software. By that, I mean both the editing software and the camera firmware. Insta360 has been doing this for years, and their desktop and mobile app are still the gold standard. The camera also has a long list of shooting modes. DJI's first attempt is very impressive, but to be honest, they still got a bit of catching up to do. Second is the user replaceable lenses. Not everyone will need this. I have a few friends that has never damaged their lenses even though they have been shooting with 360 cameras for quite a few years. But if you are worried about you may damage the lens when traveling, the user replaceable lens is a lifesaver. With DJI, your best bet is a lens guard or their replacement service. Now for the DJI Osmo 360, the larger 1-inch equivalent sensor makes a real difference, especially in low light, which is the weak spot for 360 cameras. I wouldn't call it amazing, but it's the best I've seen so far. Added 10-bit video on top, and you got a lot more flexibility when editing. I still don't know why Insta360 hasn't added 10-bit video support yet. That said, I do wish DJI would add raw photo support. Finger crossed it comes in a future update. The other big win for DJI is the ecosystem. The Osmo 360 shares the same batteries, quick release mount, and also the Osmo audio support with their latest cameras. That's a huge deal if you already own DJI gear or plan to. DJI's wireless microphone system is one of the best right now. So I think DJI is very Apple-like. They create a lot of really nice products. Sooner or later, you want to buy one of their products. And once you buy into their ecosystem, everything just works seamlessly together. Insta360 on the other hand, almost feel like the opposite. Every camera has a different battery, a different quick release mount. It's a bit weird because if they had followed DJI's approach, they would have built a really strong ecosystem with their early lead. And finally, there's the price. DJI has been really aggressive here. The Osmo 360 is cheaper than the X5 in most countries. And when you also consider the other things like 105GB of built-in storage and the included lens cover, these are things Insta360 hasn't included. The Osmo 360 ends up being the better value overall. So these are my takeaways after a month of shooting side by side with these two cameras across 3 countries and 2 big trips. But now I want to hear from you. Which 360 cameras would you choose and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to see what you think. Also, I've got a review of the DJI Osmo Nano coming up soon. So if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it.